The story begins with two gangsters watching a woman named Neha. Not long after, they put on animal print masks. Then they drag Neha from her car and make her faint. As a result of the incident, Neha was in a coma for over 2 months. After she wakes up from consciousness, she visits a temple to seek advice from a Sai priest so that she can be more calmer in facing her problems. The scene then moves to Kashmir, where there is a member of the Special Forces who is eliminating terrorist groups with ease. He is Ronnie, an Indian Army special officer who has always been a mainstay in his army. He will not hesitate to kill anyone who dares to step on the honor of his country. After completing his mission, Ronnie returned to his base camp to rest, but when he checked his cell phone, he got a voice message from his ex-girlfriend, who turned out to be Neha. When he heard the message, he was immediately moved to meet Neha. That is because he hasn't been able to forget her, even though he has broken up for 4 years. Apart from failing to move on, he also suspected that Neha needed his help, so finally he decided to take a 7-day leave. Initially, Ronnie wasn't allowed to leave the base camp, but because he had done so much, his leave request was finally accepted and granted by his superiors. On the way, Ronnie recalled his past memories with Neha. The two of them first met in college, and it didn't take long for them to start liking each other. However, Neha's father didn't like the way Ronnie was disrespectful to her. Despite her father's warning, Neha met Ronnie again to give him her cell phone number. From there, their relationship became closer, until finally they decided to date without Neha's father know. Then one day, Ronnie promised Neha that whatever happens, he will always be there for her. Therefore, Ronnie was willing to come all the way to keep his promise. But seeing his arrival, Neha was surprised by Ronnie's neat appearance, because in the past his appearance was very unruly. Not only his appearance, the woman also didn't expect that Ronnie worked as a soldier. After some small talk, Neha told him that she was married and had a child named Rhea. Ronnie was immediately disappointed, but unfortunately Neha had lost Rhea 2 months ago, when she was attacked by 2 gangsters. According to Ronnie, they had intended to kidnap Rhea from the start because Neha didn't lose any money or jewelry, even her car wasn't taken and is still intact today. And strangely enough, no one asked her for ransom. Therefore, she wanted to ask Ronnie for help in finding Rhea. Of course, the news made Ronnie feel sorry for Neha. On the other hand, Ronnie was also sad because he had to save the child of his ex-girlfriend who left him 4 years ago. But after pondering for a long time, Ronnie finally decided to help Neha because, after all, he had promised her. The next day, Ronnie went to a car rental to rent a car that he would use while looking for Rhea. Here, Ronnie met a disabled man named Usman, who was the owner of the rental. Then, when Usman found out Ronnie's profession, he immediately respected him, because soldiers are people who are willing to die for their country. Hearing the compliment, Ronnie just smiled. Then Ronnie picked up Neha with his rental car. Then Neha told him that she was almost desperate because she had not found a clear clue to find Rhea. Even the police seemed to be ignoring the case. On the other hand, Neha's husband couldn't do anything either, as he was depressed after his child was kidnapped and chose to focus on running his shipping business. After hearing Neha's explanation, Ronnie took her to the police station to ask about the progress of the case. But when he got there, he was asked to sign a letter withdrawing the case. Worse, the policeman also told Neha to make another child while flirtatiously teasing her. Not accepting this attitude, Ronnie immediately beat him up. Despite being ganged up by dozens of policemen, Ronnie was able to defeat them with enormous strength. But just as he wanted to finish off the flirtatious cop, Neha stopped him. This action make, Ronnie was arrested and put in a cell. There, the corrupt policies tortured him severely and cruelly. However, Ronnie didn't feel the slightest pain because he had a strong and muscular body. Until they found out that he was a member of the Special Forces who had recently slaughtered a terrorist group. Suddenly, they got mental down. Not long after, the police commander arrived, told them to stop the torture, and took Ronnie to his room. It turned out that the police commander was DEI G. Shergill, who was close friends with Ronnie's senior in the army. Finally, Ronnie was released from all prison charges as long as he didn't repeat it again. In addition, he was also required to return to the military base to explain the incident to his superiors. The next morning, Ronnie asked Usman for help to take him to the harbor, but on the way, he looked glum because he had to leave Neha. As a wise car rental boss, Usman advised him to follow his heart. Because to these words, Ronnie immediately canceled his return and chose to help Neha until the problem was solved. Afterward, Ronnie went to Ria's school to look for remnants of her kidnapping. But strangely, the principal didn't know anything about the incident, even though the incident happened right in front of the school building. She even said that there was no student named Ria in that place. The confused Ronnie tried to find other clues, and there happened to be a building across the school. He then approached the owner and asked permission to see the CCTV footage, but the owner kicked him out. Ronnie then visited Neha's house and told her what he had heard from the school, that there was no student named Ria there. Neha also said that the school pretended not to know because they didn't want to be involved in the kidnapping case. Ronnie, who was still confused, finally asked for Ria's latest photo to make it easier to find her. But strangely, Neha didn't have a picture of her own daughter. Suddenly, he was surprised, because usually mothers like to take and save pictures of their children. While Ronnie was still wondering, Neha suddenly told him to go home, because her brother-in-law was coming soon. The person in question was Sunny, a gangster boss who was very powerful in the area and had many illicit businesses. Ever since Neha got married to her husband, she was never comfortable with Sunny's annoying behavior and reckless drug taking. After Sunny left, Ronnie approached Neha again to ask for Sunny's phone number, as he was suspected of being involved in Ria's kidnapping. Before continuing his search, Ronnie asked one of Neha's neighbors if she had seen Ria, but Neha's neighbor said that Neha had no children. Later that night, Ronnie dialed Sunny's number from a hotel phone and claimed to be a journalist. But when he spoke about Ria's disappearance, Sunny immediately switched off the phone. As a result, Ronnie became even more confused. At the same time, he accidentally met his college friend who was leaving for a wedding. When he met his old friend, Ronnie invited to join him in the wedding. But when he got there, he was reminded of his very bleak past, because it turns out that Ronnie and Neha were married 4 years ago without the knowledge of their parents. But on the same day, Neha received news that her father had been taken to the hospital and diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. Then when Neha's father found out that his daughter was secretly married, he looked very sad. Neha finally decided to divorce Ronnie, even though the marriage had only lasted 3 hours. Moments later, Ronnie was awakened from his reverie, having accidentally bumped into an invited guest who was drunk. It turned out to be a policeman named Tayaji. Ronnie also picked up the police card that had fallen, but on second thought, he'd rather not return the card. The next day, Ronnie went to the building opposite Ria's school, and because of Tayaji's identity card, he was allowed in to check the CCTV. Here he found an oddity, as there was footage missing for 3 days right on the day of Ria's abduction. According to the security guard, there were several policemen who asked for the footage. Apart from the missing footage, Ronnie also saw Sunny, who was caught on CCTV, coming to Ria's school on the day of the incident. Of course, this made him even more suspicious of the gangster boss. Before continuing his search, he gave money to a nearby security guard and asked him to look for the missing footage. On the other hand, there is a new cop named Loha, who is known as the most handsome police in the precinct. He had just been transferred to the city to investigate a drug trafficking case. According to rumors, Loha always managed to complete his missions well, because his disguise as an addict was very convincing. Not long after, he was called by Shergill to report to his office. But after saluting her, he took a selfie that left Shergill stunned by his behavior. Of course, after that, he immediately told Loha to take a shower, because his body stinks. The rest of the time, Shergill is happy with his presence, and is confident that Loha will solve all the drug cases in his city. Elsewhere, Ronnie is tailing Sunny and his men. They want to make a drug deal with a limping man, and unexpectedly, it is Usman, the car rental owner. Apparently, Usman had a side job as a drug dealer. But when Ronnie wanted to chase Usman, he was suddenly pointed at by Sunny's men. In the end, a fight was inevitable. In just a moment, he was able to take down the 2 gangsters. He then pointed the gun at them and asked about Ria's whereabouts, but they looked confused when they heard Ria's name. With no leads, Ronnie went to Usman and asked him about his relationship with the Sunny gang. Usman casually replied that he was only involved in selling drugs because crime was a way of life in his town. He also owned a firearm, which was a common thing in his town. However, Ronnie was still suspicious that Usman might be involved in Ria's kidnapping. When they were clean and tense, they were suddenly visited by dozens of Sunny's men who wanted to beat Ronnie up. Fortunately, Usman managed to persuade the gangsters to leave. Later that night, Ronnie returned to his hotel room, but just as he is wont to enter, he is surprised by the presence of Tayaji, the man he stole his identity card from. And now Tayaji asks him to return the card, because as a police officer he needs a valid ID. The next day, there is a shocking news about Ria's kidnapping spread through the newspaper, and it turns out that Ronnie deliberately contacted the media under Tayaji's name. He then made a competition for anyone who could provide information about Ria, then he would get a reward worth 265,000 rupees. Not long after that, a man contacted him and claimed to be Ria's biological father. He even showed him her photo and birth certificate. But Ronnie doubted his confession, as it was clear that the man had nothing to do with Neha. Then a while later, he was contacted by a man named Shekhar, who was none other than Neha's husband. Long story short, he finally met Shekhar, but the man didn't know Ronnie's true identity, especially the fact that he was Neha's ex-husband. Here, Shekhar told him that his wife was traumatized by the impact on his head, and that since the incident, Neha had started hallucinating a child named Ria after seeing a missing child ad in Mumbai. He also said that his wife had suffered a miscarriage, so the memory of losing a child was deeply imprinted on her. After hearing Shekhar's explanation, all the puzzles in Ronnie's head started to come together, and now he understood why no one knew about Ria. Not long after, Ronnie received news from the building security that the missing CCTV footage had been found again. In the video, he only saw Neha being attacked by two gangsters, and there was no sign of the child. In other words, Shekhar's words were true. Without thinking, Ronnie immediately went to Neha's apartment. There, he expressed his disappointment at being lied to all this time. Meanwhile, Neha looked sad and angry. She thought Ronnie would believe her story, but instead he believed someone else. Not only that, Ronnie also convinced her that Ria was just an illusion. Neha didn't accept Ronnie's words. She finally kicked Ronnie out of her apartment. As he wanted to leave, Ronnie accidentally saw a height meter for small children, which made him hesitate instantly. He began to think that Neha was telling the truth from the start. But at the same time, Neha felt very desperate and didn't know who else to rely on. Finally, Neha took action and jumped out of the window. Unfortunately, Neha could no longer be saved and now went with the Grim Reaper. Meanwhile, Ronnie, who felt guilty, could only mourn his death regretfully while staring at Neha's red shawl. The next day, Loa and other police officers came to the crime scene to investigate. After searching the apartment, Loa interrogated Shekhar with pointed questions. Moreover, Loa also suspected that Sunny was involved in the case, who had visited Neha a few days earlier. However, Shekhar didn't accept Loa's allegations on the pretext that he had just returned from Abu Dhabi. Shekhar also said that his sister was a good person who couldn't have killed her own brother-in-law. In fact, Sunny was a gangster boss and drug dealer. Loa also warned Shekhar to be careful, as he would finish him if found guilty. Long story short, the police managed to collect all the evidence from the apartment, including Neha's cell phone. And upon further investigation, they conclude that Ronnie is the prime suspect, as he was proven to have called her on the day of her death. At the same time, Sunny sent two gangsters to finish off Tayaji. Here, they had no idea that the police's identity had been used by Ronnie all along. In other words, they chose the wrong target. On the other hand, Usman visits Ronnie in his hotel room. He mourns Neha's passing, and he also feels guilty for not being honest from the beginning that he had seen Sunny's men kidnapping Ria. But on the day of the incident, Sunny and his friends gave him a lot of money to keep shut his mouth. And it didn't stop there, they also threatened to kill him if he dared to tell someone. Usman realized that his actions were wrong. Because of him, Neha was now lifeless. Hearing his confession, Ronnie couldn't stop thinking about what Usman did, and to fix for his feeling guilty, Usman was ready to help Ronnie in finding Ria's locations. However, as he wanted to leave the hotel, a woman screamed loudly, and it turned out that she was hysterical after seeing the dead Tayaji. Suddenly, Ronnie felt responsible for the policeman's death, which must have been caused by his identity theft. But at the same time, Loa called him and said that he was already at the hotel to arrest him. Luckily, Ronnie and Usman could get out of there without getting caught. They both then went to a nightclub, where Sunny was throwing a party by hiring India's most famous singer. Without wasting any time, Ronnie went straight to Sunny. Unfortunately, Sunny could escape from there. Ronnie couldn't pursue him as he was surrounded by the police, but they seemed to have trouble catching Ronnie, despite mobilizing dozens of people. After a long struggle, Lola and his subordinates were finally able to bring Ronnie to the police station. Inside the cell, he was furious at the police for letting Sunny escape. Sunny was the mastermind of Ria's kidnapping. It was as if they were pretending not to know about this case. Hearing Ronnie's accusation, Lola didn't accept it and challenged him to a fistfight in the cell. Although they were both brutal, Lola had to accept the fact that Ronnie was too strong. In the middle of the fight, they were stopped by the arrival of Shergill. Ronnie persuaded the commander and the police to interrogate Usman, who was an eyewitness to Ria's kidnapping. Based on Usman's testimony, Shergill ordered his men to arrest and interrogate Sunny. But Sunny was undeterred, even answering questions jokingly. Unable to letting his behavior, Loa drew his gun, and the commotion escalated when Shergill tried to separate the two of them. Then Shergill suddenly shot Sunny. After the incident, Shergill apologized to Ronnie for Sunny's death. He was the only key person to finding Ria. Shergill then calmed Ronnie down and said that he understood how he felt, especially regarding Neha's death, because a few years ago he had also lost a family member in a car accident. But Ronnie still couldn't calm down until the police found Ria. In addition, he began to suspect Shekhar, who had said that Neha had a mental illness and often hallucinated. Unfortunately, Shergill couldn't arrest him just like that, especially without any clear evidence. On the other hand, Usman is visited by two members of Sunny's gang who previously finished off Tayaji in the hotel room. Then, without further ado, the two of them immediately beat him to a pulp. When they want to kill him, Ronnie came to the place to meet Usman. Unfortunately, the man was already dying, and suddenly Ronnie was attacked by Sunny's men from behind. Ronnie, who was already strong, easily defeated them both. He then approached Usman to ask about his condition, but unfortunately Usman couldn't survive any longer. While Ronnie was mourning Usman's passing, he heard the ringing sound of a cell phone belonging to one of the gangsters he had just finished off, and it turned out that the message came from Shergill. Unexpectedly, it turned out that they were not Sunny's men, but Shergill's henchmen. So all along, he was the real ruler of the city, working with the gangsters to control the drug market in India. In addition, he also had a special base in the middle of the forest that was heavily guarded by mercenaries. Without thinking, Ronnie headed to Shergill's headquarters to find Ria. Upon arrival, he was confronted by corrupt policemen who were ordered to kill him. But as a member of the special forces, Ronnie was undaunted and could defeat them all. Afterwards, he wrapped his wound with Neha's red scarf, so that Neha's spirit could join the fight against the criminals who had kidnapped her only daughter. Then bravely, Ronnie broke into the Shergill headquarters area and immediately slaughtered mercilessly. On the other hand, Shergill already knew of Ronnie's arrival, and he mobilized his entire army to attack him, because to finish Ronnie off, he needs a lot of power. But despite sending many troops, Shergill was still unable to stem his brutality. Moreover, Ronnie's movements are difficult to guess, because he can appear suddenly from a very unexpected place. Not long after, the army colonel came to Loha, who was in the middle of the forest while monitoring the movements at Shergill's headquarters. Here, the colonel came to take over Ronnie's case, who was a military officer. Then the colonel also said that Ronnie had the strength equivalent to dozens of soldiers, making it almost impossible to defeat. However, Lola is not afraid at all and will continue to investigate the case to the end. At the same time, Ronnie managed to infiltrate Shergill's armory. Inside, he stole several firearms. Afterward, he lit the cigarette lighter, and the war began again. Meanwhile, Shergill was visibly alarmed to see hundreds of his soldiers being wiped out by Ronnie. He finally decided to send 2 helicopters to attack him from the sky, which turned out to make Ronnie even more indiscriminate. It didn't take long for him to break through the last wall of defense and make his way into the core base. Inside, he was awaited by Shergill's henchmen, who seemed the troublemaker. With only half his strength, he was able to crush their bones. But strangely, one of Shergill's henchmen looked familiar to Ronnie, and sure enough, it turned out to be the person who once claimed to be Thea's father. Here, Ronnie realized that the man had been paid to make him suspicious of Neha. As a result, he killed him on the spot. But at the same time, Shergill appeared and shot him from behind. Suddenly, Ronnie was going berserk. Unfortunately, Shergill cheated and managed to knock him down. Then, when Ronnie didn't put up a fight. The corrupt cop finally says that Rhea is still alive, and the mastermind caused of all this was Shekhar, who told Sunny to kill Rhea, who was not his biological daughter. Shekhar also begins to hate Neha because of Rhea. Eventually, he comes up with an evil plan to kill Rhea and drive his wife crazy. Not stopping there, Shekhar also deliberately burns all the objects related to Rhea, then convinces everyone closest to her to pretend not to know about Rhea's existence. However, his plan failed miserably when he was caught by Shergill, and being a cop, he made a deal with the businessman. He wanted to smuggle drugs through Shekhar's shipping business, and if he refused, he would not hesitate to throw him in jail for kidnapping Rhea. After hearing all these explanations, Ronnie went berserk and immediately grabbed his throat and beat him up emotionally. But unfortunately, Shergill was able to turn the tables and almost killed him. But suddenly, Lola shot Shergill in the back. Apparently, Lola had recorded the whole conversation and decided to finish Shergill off, because he deserved to die. On the other hand, Ronnie looked frustrated when he saw Shergill die, because he was the only one who knew where Rhea was. But not long after, a girl came down the stairs, and she was Rhea. The next day, Lola visits Ronnie at the hospital to tell him that Shekhar has been arrested. He also reveals the shocking fact that Rhea is Ronnie's biological daughter with Neha. Apparently, when their relationship broke down, Neha was actually pregnant, but she hadn't told anyone yet. After hearing Loa's explanation, Ronnie was touched and immediately approached Rhea with a smile, while imagining Neha's presence there. And from then on, he decided to protect his only daughter well. With those facts exposed, the movie ended.